I'm Julia McCarthy. I'm a senior program officer with the NYHealth Foundation. And before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We'll be recording this webinar, and a recap with link to the recording and other materials will be shared afterwards. Video and audio are disabled for attendees, but we invite you to use the chat box throughout the discussion to share questions and thoughts. And finally, we have closed captioning available for those of you who'd like to use that feature, and you can click in the top right corner, I believe. It may have switched. Zoom is always making improvements. So we have quite a few new faces on this webinar. So for those of you who are not familiar with NYHealth, we are a statewide foundation dedicated to improving the health of New Yorkers. Our Healthy Food, Healthy Lives team specifically focuses on improving food quality, affordability, and accessibility for New Yorkers. So for example, we've supported efforts to ensure that all New York students have access to free school meals. And building on these investments in school food, we're looking at efforts that have expand access to, improve participation in, or increase funding, for other populations, for instance, those who are incarcerated. So today I'm honored to be joined by three guests who will help us better understand food and nutrition in New York State's correctional facilities. We have Assemblymember Eddie Gibbs, Commissioner Dan Marticello, and Dr. Rodleisha Sneed. So just a little background on who those people are. Assemblymember Gibbs represents New York's 68th District, which encompasses East Harlem, Randall's Island, and parts of the Upper East Side and Central Harlem. As the first formerly incarcerated person to serve in the New York State Legislature, and only the second to serve in any U.S. state legislature, Assemblymember Gibbs brings a critical perspective to Albany. In addition to introducing legislation on food in prisons, Assemblymember Gibbs has also sponsored bills on the reentry process, the creation of digital health records, emergency release plans, and many more. He received his associate degree in business and administration from Cayuga Community College. Welcome. We have Mr. Marticello, who serves as commissioner for the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. He began his career as a correctional officer with the department in May 1997. He is the first former corrections officer to be appointed to the position of commissioner. Commissioner Marticello holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology with a concentration in criminology from SUNY Cortland, and he's a member of numerous professional associations, including the American Correctional Association, the Board of Directors for SUNY Cortland, Alumni Association, and the chair of the Northeast Region of the Correctional Leaders Association. Welcome, Commissioner Marticello. And Dr. Rodleisha Sneed joins us from Wayne State University, where she is an assistant professor in the Institute of Gerontology and the Department of Psychology. Her research focuses on how economically vulnerable adults can maintain good health as they age. She was previously a research scientist with the Michigan Center for Urban African American Aging Research, where she examined the health and well-being of older adults with a history of incarceration. And she holds a PhD in social and health psychology from Carnegie Mellon University. Welcome, Dr. Sneed. So we're just delighted to have this group of experts here today, and I'm grateful for all of you joining us on this holiday week. It's a great turnout, so thanks again. We're here to celebrate the release of a report by the Correctional Association of New York on food and nutrition in New York State prisons. CANI, which is the acronym they go by, has authority under state law to provide oversight of prisons in New York State. And this report provides a comprehensive overview of the kinds of food sources available to people in prisons. It also highlights opportunities to strengthen and expand existing policies and programs to improve food and nutrition. So it's also important to note that the report includes a response from the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, also known as DOCS. So you'll hear me use that term, and others will use that term. We'll drop a link to the report in the chat shortly. And finally, just a little framing before I turn it over to our experts. I wanted to highlight a few of the key recommendations. So CANI identified concerns from incarcerated people that they had interviewed across the system about the quality and nutritional value of meals in prisons, and specifically that there was a lack of fresh produce and high quantities of processed foods. Many incarcerated individuals that they surveyed reported avoiding meals in the mess hall, choosing instead to prepare their own meals with items purchased from the commissary or ordered through outside vendors. And these supplemental food sources are expensive, and there's limited access to equipment for safe food preparation and storage. But Canny also highlighted some promising initiatives that DOCS offers, including programs that provide food service training, as well as a recent supplementary nutrition assistance or SNAP pilot, which we're excited about, which was launched in 2023 to connect incarcerated individuals with access to SNAP benefits immediately upon release. So with that, we'll turn it over to our panelists. And Dr. Sneed, I'm going to start with you. Would you start by providing us with some insight into health disparities faced by people in prisons and jails? What role does food play in improving or exacerbating these health disparities?
Sure. So when we think about correctional health, often what we tend to think about are things like substance use or mental illness, which we know we see higher rates of both of those in incarcerated populations compared to the general population. But what we're actually seeing is high rates of chronic health conditions as well. And a lot of that is related to the fact that in general, US prison populations are aging. So in New York State, for example, the number of adults age 55 plus who are incarcerated has doubled since the 1990s. And nationally, we've seen that we've had a 500% increase in the number of adults age 55 plus who are incarcerated compared to the 1990s. And so with this increase in the number of older adults, we're seeing increases in health conditions that are typically common among older adults. So things like high blood pressure or diabetes or heart disease. So when we look at prison populations, about 62% of adults age 55 plus who are incarcerated in state prisons have high blood pressure. 1 in 4 have diabetes. 1 in 4 have heart disease. And what's really important about all of these conditions is the fact that nutrition and food play a big role, both in whether or not people develop these conditions, as well as how well they manage these conditions. So if you think about something like high blood pressure, we know that sodium intake plays a key role in whether people get hypertension and also how well they're able to manage it. And so if we're thinking about the types of foods that people should be eating, they should be foods that are lower in sodium intake. So things like fresh fruit and vegetables, have very little sodium in them, if at all. However, the processed foods, the ones that are shelf stable that you typically see on your shelves in your grocery stores, those foods have a lot of sodium in them. So it's really important if we're talking about someone with high blood pressure that they have access to more of that fresh food as opposed to processed food. We can think about diabetes. Diabetes is a condition where managing the amount of carbohydrates that you eat is really important. So a person without diabetes, for example, when they eat carbohydrates, they're taking in glucose, which is a sugar, into the body. And then that glucose is used throughout the body where it's needed to provide energy. But a person who has diabetes is not able to process glucose in that same way. So if they're eating carbohydrates, that glucose is just sitting in the bloodstream as opposed to going throughout the body. And having that glucose in the bloodstream is going to lead to a lot of health problems. And so for people who have diabetes, really focusing on controlling your carbohydrate content is important. So again, the processed foods tend to have a lot of carbohydrates in them. You want to avoid eating a lot of simple sugars and instead have a lot of complex carbohydrates. So it's really important for a person who has diabetes to sort of think about what type of carbohydrates they're eating and how those may impact how well they manage disease. So again, all of these conditions really are about managing the type of food that you eat, understanding nutrition, and how that can impact your health outcomes once you have these chronic health conditions is really important.
Dr. C, that's so interesting about, the fact that the population is aging, contributing to sort of this overall disease burden and a shift maybe in the kinds of diseases you're expecting. I had, before looking into your research, thought that a lot of the, sort of differences in health status might come from underlying the condition in which people came into the system, that they were, coming from often places where there were, less access to healthy foods in the first place, or because, factors like systemic racism sort of from communities that didn't, where redlining was occurring and affordable fresh produce was out of reach for many. And then it's just interesting to think about how not only people come into the system, but then how the system sort of can exacerbate those situations. And I mean, a problem overall as we get older, both within, corrections facilities, but also outside. This is a trend that we should be thinking about overall, as that the aging population has very different dietary needs, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that. So, Assemblymember Gibbs, would you tell us a little bit about your personal experience that motivates your work on the issue, and why food in corrections facilities is so important to you?
Good morning. Yeah, it's very important, from my personal experience, being incarcerated, we didn't have too many good dietary vegetables and fruits and such. We had a lot of shelf food. So coming home and getting lucky enough to be elected to the New York State Assembly and having an opportunity to share my experiences beyond the desk, it made sense that, we legislate on my experience, right? I knew that there wasn't good or fresh food coming in at the time. So, visiting facilities and talking to incarcerated individuals, we come up with ideas, right? My experiences come from the inside. Through my experiences and through my visits, we legislate. And so we came up with this idea to push this legislation. Also excited because we have a commissioner who's not only visible and accessible, but also listens, right? So we get these ideas, we push the legislation, and we hopefully get it passed through the Senate and the government, which we were lucky to do with our food to prison bill.
It's really interesting of all the sort of situations within corrections facilities, that come up, that food has risen to the top, and you say that that's what people are telling you on visits. And when you talk to incarcerated individuals, one of the issues that they've brought up, and I'm wondering if you have, like, are there specific examples of things they say they'd like to see, or specific foods that come to mind that that you feel like would make a difference?
Oh, certainly. Again, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, especially for the elder incarcerated individuals. Oh, that was on top of the list. When you go to the mess hall and, you have these options, it helps out. It helps out. So, all the other, wish list, the steaks, the other things, fresh fruits and vegetables is key. And so, we want to push that legislation.
Great. So we've heard a little bit background on sort of like what people are asking for or interested in, what are the health impacts. And so Commissioner Marticell, I'd love to turn it to you. And could you please describe how DOCS provides healthy food options for the approximately 33,000 people in your facilities, and how you promote health and nutrition?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of the panel. Thank you to New York Health Foundation and certainly my other panelists. Appreciate the discussion this morning. In terms of DOCS, let me start with a quick overview. Obviously, the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, we operate 42 prisons across New York State with approximately 33,500 incarcerated people, which is down 54% from our high in 1999. We also oversee parole with approximately 17,500 incarcerated people. As it pertains to nutrition and food inside of DOCS, the department provides nutritious, diverse, and quality meals 3 times a day, 7 days a week to the population that we serve. Not a small undertaking. It operates through a centralized food production center, which is located in Oneida County and connected to Mohawk Correctional Facility, where the staff and the incarcerated people that work there prepare the meals for the population across the state. FPC, Food Production Center, is run through the Office of Nutritional Services, and it's a USDA kosher certified food processing center that leverages our buying power across the state for economies of scale. It uses a cook chill model in preparing large quantities of nutritious food, where the meals are cooked, placed into large bags and chilled at a high rate, and then placed in refrigerators. It's really a 3-week cycle where the meals are prepared 1 week, they're delivered to facilities the next, and then they're consumed the following week. In terms of some of the aspects in the report I'd like to address a little bit is about the quality and the palatability. The food production team continuously looks towards menus that objectively ensure food items are accessible in terms of quality and taste to incarcerated people. We use a master recipe whereby our dietitian and our food service staff at the food production center taste every ingredient and every meal that is provided, and that we operate with an understanding that quality food and the consistent supply are contributing factors to smooth running facilities, but more importantly, have a role in maintaining the safety and health of incarcerated people. When we talk about incarcerated folks and having input into that process, we do make it an interactive process. Every facility has a incarcerated liaison committee. There are elected members of the population elected by their peers to meet with the superintendent on a monthly basis, which we engage on a regular basis in terms of providing feedback on the types of food that we're providing, the palatability, the nutrition, what they like, what they dislike. For example, as pointed out in the report, there's been some criticism of the use of soy. So taking that response from the population, we have now scaled back a number of recipes that we're relying upon soy to ensure we are listening to the people that we serve. When it comes to nutrition, the department incorporates the dietary guidelines for DJA in the preparation of all menus. The menus meet or exceed the recommended dietary allowances in accordance with the DJA, and they're adequately nutritious for a healthy adult. The portion size in terms of the meals is in accordance with our nutritional services portion chart, and they really reflect the daily nutritional analysis, which averages 2,800 calories and 90 grams of protein per day. We use a variety of factors in developing our menus and taking into account the nutritional needs of the population, including the age, which the doctor has talked about the aging population, both in New York and across the nation, as well as sex and activity levels. And then those are determined by the governing agencies such as the DGA, as well as we are fully accredited by the American Correctional Association, which has a number of standards in dealing with food within our facilities. We also offer a number of special diets or medically necessary diets that are requested by the healthcare provider. Both our dietitians and our nutritionists across the state will work cooperatively with the healthcare providers. We have over 19 special medical meals associated with a variety of chronic conditions to ensure that we are providing adequate meals that meet the health conditions of the population that we serve. As mentioned earlier, we're also a kosher facility. We do serve a hot kosher meal as well as a number of items coming out of the institution. The FPC are kosher as well. Under the governor's leadership, she issued Executive Order 32, which really bolstered New York's agricultural industries and set goals for state agencies. For the end of 2023, the goal for state agencies was 5%. I'm pleased to report that New York State Docs was at 19%, and are really working well with ags and markets to make sure that we are exceeding the goals set by the governor. We serve on 2 active work groups, the Procurement Working Group and the Procurement Advisory Council, in an effort to continue to expand the EO 32 requirements within our meal choices. Overall, I will say that we have a healthy offering that in each meal, we offer fruits and vegetables on our menu for the incarcerated population, as well as incorporate fresh fruits and vegetables. Just at the Food Production Center alone, last year in total, separate and apart from the weekly or sometimes twice a week deliveries to correctional facilities, we have purchased over 1.8 million pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables, with almost 800,000 pounds coming directly from New York farms across this state, really leveraging the agriculture industry here in New York State to make sure we're providing nutritious meals. Assemblymember Gibbs, as was mentioned during his opening remarks, as well as leading into his discussion, sponsored Assembly 6854, which just late last week the governor signed into law. And again, that requires us to establish a program to purchase those healthy, fresh fruits and vegetables for New York State incarcerated individuals. We are certainly well on our way, as that's something that's important to me, to make sure that we are not only procuring those fresh fruits and vegetables, but getting them to the incarcerated folks that we serve. We have a great partnership with the Assembly member, and look forward to continue to expand what we're doing in New York to provide that service to the population. There was a few mentions of some other things that we're doing, and I'll briefly touch on them because I could talk on these things all day. But separate and apart from the delivery of food services, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, we also offer a culinary arts program where incarcerated individuals can enroll in a program and work towards their Serve Safe certificate, as well as an apprenticeship through the Department of Labor. And you had mentioned the SNAP pilot program, where we have launched that last year, really focusing on food insecurity, which is a huge barrier to reentry when we talk about incarcerated people returning to their communities. We partnered with the National Executive Council, who's associated with Columbia University Center for Justice, who are comprised of a number of formerly incarcerated individuals who got their degrees while incarcerated, and as well as New York City DSS, to make sure that we're doing enrollment in 6 correctional facilities for individuals 30 days prior to returning home. We are looking to expand with the renewal of that application to additional facilities. And I have also engaged 3 other counties, the next 3 counties outside of New York City, which were the largest counties where people were returning home, to try to engage them in terms of enrolling in this pilot program, as we see so much benefit to people returning home to the community, not having to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. So the partnerships along the way has really been tremendous. I'm thankful for the staff that are involved in all of these initiatives, as well as those providers that are engaged on a daily basis for what we do here in New York.
Commissioner Marticel, thank you. I think that how food is served in corrections facilities, what kinds of foods are available, are just, for many people outside the system, a black box. So it's really helpful both to hear your description of it and to have Canny's report out. So now it'll be accessible to so many more people. There's a lot of chatter there's a lot of questions in the chat, and you teed up so nicely this question about solutions. So Assemblymember Gibbs, you had a huge win last Friday, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your bill.
Thank you. And excuse the background, there's a lot going on. I was previously in the room, they moved me, alarm is going off, a fire alarm is here, the commissioner's over there, and so much. So I'm sorry for the distraction. Yeah, it was a very exciting moment. We got the call Friday, the governor signing the bill. Previously to her signing it, was in Shawangunk for about 4 visits in the past 2 weeks. Just talking to the incarcerated individuals about the bill and prior bills, and they were really excited about this bill. Having an opportunity to see it pass on Friday was exciting because, again, the conversations come from within inside. During my visits, I call the commissioner and say, hey, I'm on my way to this facility. And as I arrive to the facility, I promote everything that I'm legislating on. And this particular bill was just one of the ones they were excited about, and was hopefully that it would pass.
And for those who aren't familiar with it, Assemblymember Gibbs, do you mind explaining a little bit of the background, like what it will do? Sorry, I don't know that people may have missed that.
Oh, great. So the bill simply requires, that docs, and it's a tool, right? So incarcerated individuals will receive fresh fruits and vegetables, and in turn, also, New York State would also purchase said fruit and vegetables from local farms. Then we would then get a partnership where, incarcerated individual will receive fresh fruits and vegetables daily from said local farms. Quick synopsis of the bill.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really exciting opportunity. And I think, New York Health has been a funder for farm to school for a long time. And so supporting sort of filling in gaps, helping with implementation around this, and helping, frankly, with policy change. And I think what we've learned there translates here in that you get a great bill, it passes, and then the devil is in the details, right? So how do we all together work to make sure that the intent of the law, which is to make sure that incarcerated individuals have much more consistent access to fresh fruits and vegetables? How do we make that happen? Is it, advocating for an increase in the reimbursement to the Department of Corrections for food? Is it, taking what they're doing right now? The commissioner said at 19% of, local foods, and how do we increase that percentage, right? And how do we ensure that, for example, not all of the food is, used in cook chill, that maybe some of it's delivered as Commissioner Marticello said, and just sharing again for those who are less familiar with sort of the system, that so much of the food in New York State to those facilities comes from the Mohawk Center, the food production center, in the cook chill method. And then, as I understand it, and Commissioner, correct me if I don't have the details quite right, that the corrections facilities also get local deliveries of milk and eggs. And so there's possibly an avenue there to increase deliveries of fresh local food that people could also eat in that way. Is that correct, Commissioner?
Yeah, that's correct. The Food Production Central does the centralized ordering, and they do the quick cook chill process, but there's also locally deliveries, fresh eggs, fruit, vegetables that go directly to the institutions for utilization in the menus. And then, outside of the food processing that we provide in the mess hall, we talked about the culinary arts, which is really a program, but also we've embedded in every one of our commissaries offerings of fresh fruits and vegetables based on feedback from the population, what they want to see, what's available in the region, the time of year it is, as well as the ability through the package program to order and receive fresh fruits and vegetables.
And I think the Canny report makes pretty clear that a fairly high percentage of people are purchasing food for meal consumption through the commissary as well. I think that was something, as someone who was less familiar with corrections institutions, that I learned, that I had thought, oh, well, everyone's going to the mess hall and that's where the majority of food comes. But actually the commissary is an important source of food, right? So changing what's available there, or making sure fresh fruits are available there, is also sort of an avenue to increase health. Is that correct? Actually,
yeah, I mean, certainly, I can't lend to the actual numbers in the Caney report. I think that they're based on small percentages of the population. I think looking at the numbers, out of 33,000 they used a sample of 1,000. Some facilities were as low as 19, right? But yeah, definitely commissary augments what's going on in the mess hall. There are certainly people that don't go to the mess hall for their own choosing. And I think that that's a product of the things that we've also provided access to, which is a positive thing in terms of access to cooking facilities, depending on the infrastructure and nature of that institution. But clearly it was important to me to continue to provide that access to fresh fruits and vegetables, which is why we mandated that every institution through their commissary offer those types of products. And again, it's really based on feedback from the population. I don't want to decide here from Albany which set fruits and vegetables are offered in the commissary. But one way we are looking to also expand on our commissary offerings, because the report also talked about disparities in terms of pricing and what's available, what's out of stock. We are in the process of looking at utilizing a statewide vendor, which would allow us to increase options. An average commissary buy list has about 200 items on it. With using a statewide vendor, we would potentially be able to go up to 500 items, as well as increase fruits and vegetables tremendously. So that's something that I am exploring, which would also open up additional healthy options.
And Julia, if I may, can I jump in?
yes,
So
please.
I'm reading some of the comments, right? Yeah. So the bill was just passed on Friday. It has a lot of requirements. My job as a legislator is just continue to follow up, right, to make sure that the bill is actually working. I'm excited that we have a commissioner again who listens, right? Monticello's taking the helm. And every visit I go to, the liaison committee, express this, the commissioner is working with us. We want to do some things, like my wage bill. We want to raise the wage in prison, right? We want to change some commissary things. We're working on a commissary bill. We have to work together to make sure these things work, right? And so that's the whole process, Dr. Sneed. We want to work with everyone to make sure that even after I leave this seat, the one come behind me, make sure that this legislation continue to carry. And, it's a process. We just got it signed Friday. Let's trust the process. And again, I'm going to emphasize, we have a commissioner who not only listens, but is working with us and encourages everyone else to work with them. So this is an amazing time right now in the legislature for people.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gibbs. I think that the point about like any law actually having an effect is so contingent on working together. So your point is well taken, and having people within an agency who are willing to listen and take feedback and work on it is so important. So thank you both. Dr. Sneed, I would like to turn to you to, what are some, we've talked a little bit about solutions here, but what are some other promising practices for improving health through nutrition, and what sort of interventions are you interested in that we should be thinking about in New York?
So I think a lot of what's been talked about so far is sort of structural interventions, which I think are really important and I think are really key in terms of thinking about, transforming healthcare and, chronic disease within prisons. There are also some sort of individual level interventions as well that I think can be really useful. So one of the things that I really think about is sort of empowering incarcerated individuals to manage their own health as well. Of course, working with the medical units within facilities, but also really making sure that incarcerated individuals understand what it takes for them to be healthy. So a lot of the programs that I've seen work well are things that are focused on sort of chronic disease self-management. So if you already have a chronic health condition, what should you be doing? How should you be eating? And really making sure that people have education. So when they go to the mess hall or they go to the commissary, do they know how to make good choices for themselves? So one program that comes to mind is there's a chronic disease self-management program that's typically offered in community settings, but a lot of correctional systems have also started to use it as well, recognizing the value of empowering people to understand nutrition and make good decisions about their health. So, it focuses on, how to pick, healthy foods and, what to look at and how to make decisions, depending on what kind of medical condition that you have. And then we can't talk about chronic disease without also talking about prevention. So, ideally, you want to keep people from getting chronic health conditions in the first place. So I think about things like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has a diabetes prevention program. So for people who might be at high risk of diabetes, they're giving a lot of education, really focusing on how to make sure that they don't progress to diabetes. So having that knowledge and having that information available in plain language that incarcerated individuals can understand is really important. Another thing that concerns me oftentimes is that, we can give people access to healthy food, but what I see is oftentimes people don't know what to do with it. So you can say, hey, we're going to give people produce, we're going to give people vegetables. How can they prepare those vegetables, and especially prepare those vegetables in ways that they actually want to eat them? So if they have sort of cultural practices related to how they eat, how can we take our knowledge of those cultural practices and actually use that to make sure that people are getting fruits and vegetables that they actually want to eat? So having it available isn't enough, making sure that people actually know what to do with it. So if we can do that as much as possible, I think that's really beneficial as well.
Thanks so much. So Commissioner Marticello, we've heard from, we've had this discussion back and forth, and I'm wondering, if based on the findings recommended from the Canny report, based on Assemblymember Gibbs, recent legislative win, are there opportunities or low-hanging fruit, so to speak, for improving health within the agency?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, as I've taken on this role, it's been important for me to stress transparency and partnerships, right? And I recognize that unfortunately, a lot of times staff and the incarcerated population don't get credit for the things that they're doing on the inside, which, unfortunately then transcends to pushback on the outside when people are reentering our communities. So I've really made it an effort to try to bolster telling their story, right? Putting the face on the incarcerated. But I also value partnerships, right? In my first year, I launched a provider advisory group made up of a variety of people I call providers, right? Which are really advocates, but also people that actually provide services to the population entrusted to my care. And I meet with them on a quarterly basis, as well as I meet with Katie on a quarterly basis in terms of their reporting, their monitoring, and providing them additional access. So, and then when I talk about the legislature, as I was out meeting with them, I really stress the governor's vision in terms of having relationships, communication, and open transparency. So I'm open to exploring opportunities and the evolution of this topic and many, many others. As you've seen in the governor's budget last year, where we increased gate money as well as turned to Edgecombe into transitional housing and all things of that nature, which are really progressive and outside of the box thinking, and New York really leading the way. So while every recommendation I think contained in here, some we've already implemented and maybe wasn't known to Katie at the time, others I definitely think that we can continue to work towards and look to see where we can continue to deliver better services to the population under our care. And certainly with Assemblymember Gibbs, he and I speak often and sometimes early, sometimes late. But the relationship that my office has with the Assembly member and other members of the legislature to have that dialogue and be open to the evolution, particularly as it pertains to food, I think is critically important as we move forward.
Yeah, and I mean, even just you mentioned that the earlier, like that all the meals were consistent with the DGAs, and so I think that's something that isn't frankly like apparent. And so some of the other facilities like are outside of New York are publishing their menus and also showing the nutritional facts, and so like that would be, for example, having that information. And I know you have given Canny the menus and they will be doing a nutritional analysis, but having that information more public, I think.
Yeah, the menus are actually available on our website. Shortly after becoming commissioner, I did begin publishing those menus online, as well as a number of other policies online as well, to make it accessible to the public so they have an understanding of what's going on behind the fences and walls within our institution. So they are available. In terms of the nutritional facts, we do make them available upon request, but definitely something we'll take back to look at, because I think it's important that the population understands what goes into these meals, because you can get misled by the lore of what you think or what you heard and what was passed down to you. So them having access to that information up front so they can understand what goes into the meal making and our buy power in terms of fresh fruits and vegetables and access to that, I think is important. So that's definitely, like I said, there's some of the recommendations we're going to take a close look at to see how we can continue to dispel some of the myths that are out there in terms of the availability of food and what goes into the food that's served in our mess halls.
Yeah, I mean, certainly thank you for publishing those. The more information that's available to the public, I think, the better informed we are about this and the better able we are to advocate for improvements, increased budgets, other support, collaboration. And so I think that's really important. So we appreciate it. I'm going to start to turn. There are so many questions in the webinar chat. And so I don't want to leave people hanging. Commissioner, some of these actually may end up coming to you as a result of just sort of what they look like. And I'd love, if anyone else has expertise on them, to chime in. So a question that has come up quite a bit is one on food and nutrition for pregnant people. So what DOCS does to support pregnant people and their children in prisons. And it's an area I would love to hear more about as well. So I want to say that's come up quite a bit.
Yeah, so, in terms of pregnant individuals in our custody, as you may know, the majority of pregnant females are housed at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, where we operate the longest serving nursery in the United States, right? We were the first and the longest operational nursery in the United States. So as I mentioned during my opening remarks, we have registered dietitians and nutritionists, one of which is assigned to Bedford Hills as it has a regional medical unit who work directly with the doctors on site and the OBG that are providing services to that population to make sure that we are tailoring those medically necessary meals to those individuals to provide them the nutrients not only to themselves, but their unborn child throughout the period of pregnancy and then beyond as they go into postpartum.
Thank you. Another question that came up quite a bit was around horticultural programming. So people were wondering if you could describe a little bit more about the horticultural programming. Is there food production, and is there an opportunity to increase access to farming while in corrections facilities?
Yeah, so two things on horticulture. It's really broken down into two things. So our vocational program dealing with horticulture is primarily dealing with plants and not growing fresh fruits and vegetables. But that is a program that's ongoing across the facilities where we are teaching horticulture. And we're actually now in some locations pushing into hydroponics, where we had SUNY Potsdam provide us with a couple of the trees, the towers for hydroponic growing, as well as launching a program both at Queensboro and Edgecombe correctional facilities. Separately, we are involved with an organization called Harvest Now, where they provide the seeds to facilities and we grow fresh fruits and vegetables. But the primary purpose of that program is really to donate to the communities, even where there are an ability to accept small percentages of the growth of that produce and keep them at the facility. The majority of the times the incarcerated population wants to donate that back to the community and really show that they're giving back and that they can be productive members to help people through food banks and what have you. So those are the two areas, primarily with horticulture and Harvest Now, where we're involved in plants, gardening, and growing fruits and vegetables.
We had an opportunity to visit the food production center and also see the horticulture there and the horticulture program there. And I'd say that, you know, one thing that stuck out to me was just that jobs in the food production center and being able to do work within the horticulture program were seen as, you know, very desirable roles there. And so I think that, you know, would love to continue to think about ways that those sort of programming could be expanded, because people seem to really love them and would love to, you know, be more involved with food in the, so just.
Yeah, I will tell you, you know, under the governor's Jails to Jobs initiative, we are currently undergoing and have two different task forces that are looking at the full program offerings, both not only on the academic and vocational side, but really on the employment side, to make sure what we're offering in our institutions align to the job market of tomorrow. So we've done some revamping, and certainly the food industry is an industry that has been very accepting of formerly incarcerated individuals upon returning to the community. As I mentioned, the culinary arts, they're able to get their Serve Safe certificate. We are partnering with Commissioner Reardon with the Department of Labor on an apprenticeship program that leads to a cooking apprenticeship and a chef, it's called, certification. So definitely aligning with the job market of tomorrow, and food is definitely something that's prevalent in our communities.
Great. So another question that has come through, and one, I'm sorry if there's an obvious answer for this, but people were asking about SNAP enrollment, if there was an ability to use it, like if people could be enrolled in SNAP while incarcerated, if they could use it at the commissary, and someone's asking about WIC within corrections facilities. Because you're providing food, I'm not sure that people are eligible for them, but I want to pose that to you.
Yeah, so I'll talk on a really high level based on what I know. I would really defer that question to the Commissioner of the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance and local DSS. But what I can tell you is, similar to Medicaid, right? We enroll people in Medicaid, so when they hit the street that they have continuity of care from healthcare, and while they're incarcerated, that's in suspended status. Similar with SNAP, with the pilot program we've launched, we have to get special permission through OTDA, working in collaboration with DSS, to even get permission to do enrollment in the last 30 days of incarceration. So that way they hit the community and immediately have access. So those aren't programs that are typically afforded to incarcerated people during incarceration. So it tends to be when they're in the community. Obviously, we provide access to 3 meals a day, 7 days a week to the population during the period of incarceration.
Thank you. Again, I am reading what is here, and so I'm sorry that so many of these are not to you, Dr. Sneed, or to you, Assemblymember Gibbs, but I'm trying to look at sort of volume first.
But Julia, if I may, can I
Yes,
chime in
please.
just quickly? And because I'm reading all the comments myself, and
I'd rather hear you
those,
talk than me, Assemblymember. So
no, especially specifically in those regard to the women and pregnant women incarcerated at Bedford. I believe they are receiving nutrition necessities for them. I visit there daily. I'm actually on my way there today. They're helping me with my legislation on the strip search bill. And so I visit there daily, and the women there have most of the nutritional values that they need, the water. I'm looking at all the comments, and a lot of the women are concerned. Believe you me, if there's anything wrong in Bedford, Edward Gibbs will be the first one you'll be hearing from. The pregnant women there are receiving everything they need. And again, we have a commissioner who's accessible, and I don't believe we'll allow that to happen. I've seen some other questions I'm going to, I can't answer it. So when I visit today, I will be taking that to Julia and the ladies there and receive some answers, and I'll report back later. But for the most part, the pregnant women in Bedford Correctional Facility are well taken care of.
Assemblymember Gibbs, a question from another jurisdiction actually came through to talk a little bit about how you got the bill passed. Was there opposition? How did you build a coalition? How did you get people excited about this work? And are there lessons that people can learn elsewhere?
That's a good question. It all started with my wonderful legislative director, Austin Wolfgang. He figured it out. He said, hey, these are a group of people and organizations we must reach out to and lobby. We took the bill and we walked around. First, I talked to the commissioner about it. He was very excited. We talked to some farms. They were excited about it. And then we started getting feedback from the inside, and everybody was excited about it. Our job was to make sure that the Senate side understood the excitement and that the governor understood the excitement. And Friday, she understood and signed the bill. And so we're all excited. But, the fruit and vegetable bill is just a start, Julia. It's so much more to do, right? And so I'm excited that it passed Friday, but I moved on already. I'm like 20 minutes away from Green Haven. We're going to talk about another bill, our wage bill. Then I'm on my way back to Bedford so we can talk about the amendment to my strip search bill. I'm glad that, the bill passed. But like I mentioned earlier, we have to work together, and we have to work with the commissioner and make sure that, the process is due.
Thanks so much. Another question that came up, again, back to the commissary, was around the affordability of food in the commissary, given wages within correctional facilities. And I was wondering, Commissioner Marcel, if you could speak a little bit more to that as a first, and then I'll have a follow-up. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the cost of the commissary, really that's an economy of scale, or it's based on the commodities in the community. The department does not upsell or make a profit on anything sold in the commissary. It's what we can contract for through the normal procurement process that we then in turn offer to the population. So there's obviously been volatility in the market. We see it all in what we do every day in the supermarkets, in the communities. So that definitely has an impact on the commissary pricing. Going to a statewide vendor potentially will give me additional buying power. rather than have individual contracts at each facility. As I mentioned, it'll allow me to have more offerings, but hopefully also drive the price with the economy of scale. So definitely something I am very interested in pursuing.
And I think from the food side, you know, one thing we're always thinking about with when it comes to pricing and economies of scale are also, you know, how do you support the local economy and local farmers? And there's such a tension there that finding the balance is always so difficult because on one hand, lowering the price would make food more affordable for people, which is the ultimate goal, right? The food that they want to buy. And on the other hand, you know, there may be an opportunity with this farm to prisons bill to make sure that some more local food is coming into the system, and that could be an avenue. And trying to balance those two things is not an easy job. So, you know, just pointing out that sort of inherent tension there.
Yeah, well, again, with the governor's leadership on Executive Order 32 and the Assemblyman's vision in terms of the passage of that new law, we have a great working relationship with Commissioner Ball at Ags and Markets. I mentioned two of the work groups that Ags and Markets chairs that we are committed and attend on a regular basis. We actually drive a lot of those conversations. And, you know, as we become educated on what's grown in New York, I think that we can continue to help leverage fresh fruits and vegetables to that population, really serve our agriculture industry, our farmers who work hard for our communities each and every day, and get it to this vulnerable population of incarcerated people.
Okay, I have one more that has come up a couple times, and that is the package rule, the change to the package rule, which does involve sort of like scaling up and changing the way in which the system was run. And, you know, it has gotten a lot of attention because it is frankly such a shift in the way, you know, you can't get food from home anymore through the packages.
Yeah. Well, let me address the package.
Commissioner, can I real quick before he addresses that, Julia?
Go ahead, sir.
And my visits, Julia, to all facilities are spontaneous, right? It's not arranged. I may get there 20 minutes, say, hey, Commissioner, I'm in front of the facility, extend me the courtesies, correct? And then so I would go in and I would do all these things. And one of the things I've done in the past year and a half was surprise visits in the visit area and the package area. And I won't name facilities, but in one visit, right, showed up spontaneously. They was going through packages and some of the items they were finding in the package, right? It was like diluting my argument. Like, why are we reducing items and allowed in the facilities? And in some of these packages, it was just so alarming. And then I went to another facility, which was like a medium, something big, right? No, it was so much in these packages. And so my argument, Julia, I always argue about these things. I'm reading the comments. I argue about, you know, the high pricing vendors in the visiting rooms. I argue about the commissary pricing, the wages. I see these things. I'm arguing from experience and going into these, and not all facilities, right? But some of the facilities I visited, packages coming in was like really alarming. So I'll turn it over to the commissioner. I just wanted to share that I've experienced that personally. Sorry.
Well, I appreciate it, Senator. So in terms of the package room, you know, I think that there's a couple misnomers out there. So let me clarify a few things. So we moved to a vendor package program as a result of the amount of contraband coming in through the package program, whether it was fentanyl and reducing overdoses or ceramic scalpels and what have you. And it's unfortunate because I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but unfortunately it was happening, right? And those were the things that we were finding. In 1 year, we found over almost 850 instances of drugs and contraband coming in. And when we enacted the program for packages, that reduced to less than 15 in an annual year. So, you know, definitely dramatic downshift in terms of contraband coming in through that mechanism. And I'm not naive to think that that's the only mechanism it's coming in, right? There's a variety of ways it comes in, and we're doing drug interdiction in other ways. But the package program does not do what we did the first time out, right? The first time out, we went to a vendor approved program, which failed. We were wrong. We went too far. So we took feedback from the population as well as the families, and we retooled it this time. And now you can use any vendor that you so choose. So therefore, there's not a monopoly. They can't drive prices up and make it ridiculously priced because I'm pushing you to 5 vendors. You could use any vendor that's available other than those that have already been disapproved. Meaning if a vendor is sent in contraband through this process, then we'll disapprove their use in the future and we publicize that list. So any vendors available, it's not driving exorbitant prices like the first program that was failed and we stopped. Twice a year, you could send in packages from home, but non-food related items, because we recognize the importance of family and the incarcerated and be able to get those special things, whether it's the knit hat, the knit sweater, or whatever have you, right? You could never send in pre-cooked food, right? Never. You could package it at home and deliver it on a visit in the prior iteration, but you can never bake a cake or cook a casserole and deliver it to a correctional facility. That was never allowed. So those are some of the misnomers that are out there right now. Again, it's unfortunate that we got here, but if I'm able to save one life through cutting off the ability to bring fentanyl into the system and somebody ODing, then that's a life that I've saved. And this program has been successful in my mind.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I think that this is an area that, we have experts both here on the panel and frankly, who have joined the webinar to watch today. It's an area that I'm still learning so much about. And, I have learned so much more from the CANI report and then from discussion today. I think that, this population, because they rely on access to food and healthy foods, through the department, it's such a vulnerable place. And so I'm glad that there's so many people interested in thinking about, ways we can ensure that there are healthy foods for New York individuals who are incarcerated. I'm so excited that this happened, just after Assemblymember Gibbs' bill passed, because we have some, real interest and momentum. And I hope that the conversation keeps going after this on ways that we can support implementation of that program.
Yeah, can I just add one thing only because
Sure.
I'm trying not to read the chat because there's so much, but
Yeah.
somebody did ask a follow-up. So Directive 4911 can be found on the DOC's website, and it's a listing of the types of items that can be sent in or be ordered through the vendor package program. So it's a statewide policy set here in central office. So if you're interested in finding out what's on the list of items that can be ordered through the package program or that you can send in those 2 packages a year, please access Directive 4911 on our website. We've been making a real effort to put directives online, accessible to the public, to families. So that's an important place to start. Somebody was asking that. So thank you.
Great. And thank you for that online and also the menus. So the more information that we have access to, the sort of better we are able to, think about these issues and come together on them. So I'm going to, take a moment to say thank you all for joining us today. We were so lucky to have 3 experts here. Your time is much appreciated and the work that you're doing, every single day. So brief round of applause. You can't hear everyone else, but thank you. We'll be sharing a recap with a link to the recording and the report following this event. And if you're interested in joining future events or learning more about food in prisons, you can sign up for NYHealth and CANI's listservs. We'll be doing, future work on this. So thanks again. Really appreciate the time and hope to talk with you all soon.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
And thank you.
Happy
I knew I was going to
Thanksgiving,
forget that.